So today we continue with our 13-week series on topic 10, mouthpiece of truth and justice. We're going to focus on character quotient. So we have done, now this is the fifth of the 6M on how to respond to God as we are called to work. We're going to focus on CQ, which actually has 3 aspects we're going to learn today. Our character, right? Integrity, character quotient, be sure to respond, especially as we try to be a mouthpiece of truth and justice. So how we speak on behalf of God, on behalf of the biblical truth and justice would be character-based. And curiosity quotient. It's becoming more and more important as we see tension between people. And in America, we've got the social injustice or racial tension, which leads us to the culture quotient. So all these 3 CQ are very important in this time of our day. How to be curious and how to be sensitive in the culture intelligence. So we'll focus on that and start with learning how to thrive in a diverse workplace, especially many of us who are in America, and we're probably overseas born Chinese, we're called OBC, in a different environment, right? In a mainstream American culture, how do we learn to live in a diverse workplace? And even if we are Native Americans or growing up in America, we still also need to learn how to thrive in a diverse workplace. And how would the diversity come about? Not just because of races, could also be different personality, interests, background, experience, of course, different gender. So when we have people coming in with different interests, there tend to be conflicts. So we're going to give some examples how to address conflict and be wise in handling and resolving conflicts. And because of time limitation, we're going to focus on just a few key skills and understand the 3 goals for resolving conflict are 3 R's: the relationship, the result, and the real Christian faith in action. So we'll go through those one by one. And I don't think we have enough time to cover the 7 steps of apology, so we'll cover that next time, which fits very well because we'll do the final Q, which is humility quotient. And it takes a lot of humility for us to have the courage to apologize. So we'll cover that next time. So remember, we learned the 8 Qs, or I call the beatitude quotient, right? The 8 blessings of leadership quotient. Guess what? We already now learning the 7th Q of all 8. So all the purple ones are done, and the ones that we underlined are the ones that we're focusing on today, which is the CQ, character quotient, curiosity, and culture quotient. To remind us, from the very beginning in our first class, we said God gave human race 3 mandates. And these 3 mandates have a lot to do with our topic today. First, culture mandate. Back in Genesis chapter 1, chapter 2, when after God created Adam and Eve in his own image, he blessed Adam and Eve and asked them to be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. That's the culture mandate, to manage, to work the Garden of Eden and continue now with all the different technologies and professions that we continue to carry on that culture mandate. And especially when we live in a diverse world, there are many different cultures. We want to influence and have a good influence in the culture. So that's our focus today. And the 2nd and 3rd mandates are important to help us, right? We need the Great Commandment, how to love God more and love others more in order to influence them in this culture. And finally, with the Great Commission, when Jesus told the disciples to go make disciples of all nations. So we are able to share that good news. And that's the focus of next week's lesson on how to have a chance to share the gospel how to have a chance to share the gospel, the messenger of the gospel. So we'll go back to that next time. So culture mandate, when we are in a world, wherever you live, any country, any parts of the world, it's very diverse, right? It seems like the world has come to our front door, especially for those of us in America. We have all countries represented in America. So I have a few talks recently on this topic. And today I would only cover a brief section of this. If you're interested, there are some in our website and YouTube for an hour in depth, sharing how the diversity profile looks like in Fortune 500 companies and comparing between and how we can learn between the East Asian and the South Asian culture. We're happy to say that we have both in our class. We have Asian, Chinese, and we also have South Asian, which is the Indian co-workers with us, so we can learn from each other. And how did I summarize my learning in my 33 years of career in the Fortune 500 companies, being an Asian American woman in a male Caucasian dominant environment? What did I learn? And how can we try to embrace diversity? Because there's so many benefits. And ultimately, we want to influence using our leadership. So if you look at this funnel chart, it's very revealing to show on the left, the lowest entry-level professional. You see the percentage of different race and gender represented. In the lowest level, 36% are white men, 16% are men of color, 31% are white women, and 17% are women of color. And you can see it's about half and half in the workforce between men and women in the entry level. As you go further to the right, more senior, all the way to the C-suite, COO, CMO, CFO, CEO. Wow, you can see the percentage have changed significantly. The white men got double the percentage. They have double the opportunity to dominate the C-suite. The men of color maintain quite reasonably well, 16% to 12%. So we're very happy to see that. The white women decreased from about 31% to only about half, so 18%. So there's the glass ceiling for women. And then women of color is quite sad, right? We were 17% in the early entry level. And then when you get to the C-suite, it's only 3%. So it's much reduced, only 1/6 of the original lower level. So this really tells us that it's a challenge, it's an uphill battle for women and also for people of color. I use my company as an example, and I'm very proud to say that our company is very diverse and also very supportive of diversity and inclusion. So in our company, out of the 250,000 employees around the world in 62 countries, we have 34% who are women. And then within America, in the management rank, we're happy to say 36% are women. So we certainly hope to have more. And then the 39% are people of color, like myself, and the 11% are Asian. And we continue to grow to have more women and more people of color represented. Our company was recognized to receive quite a number of diversity and inclusion awards last year. In fact, we have a senior VP in charge of this area. And I have been blessed throughout my 33 years of career. And we're very proud to say that we have cracked a bit of the glass ceiling and the bamboo ceiling. My good friend Ann Chow, she and I both went to Cornell. She's a few years younger than me. And I knew her since mid-1990s. And she has moved her career along very fast. And very proud to say that she became the first woman CEO of AT&T Business. And all history of 144 years of AT&T. And also first woman of color and Asian. And she's actually from Taiwan descent. Very gifted both in music and engineering and business. And her father was a teacher in our School of Business at AT&T, and I've taken class from him. So this is what she wrote for me in my retirement, that she's always very gracious. In fact, she's been my very important mentor and sponsor, guiding my career along the way. When I said there's 16 jobs in my 33 years, a couple of the jobs she really guided me and encouraged me to take on. And on the picture here, this another gentleman is also the highest ranking of Texas Instrument in Dallas, Texas, a senior VP. So we were both all speakers at a conference, and we took a picture together. Even back in the 1994 days, when I was at AT&T Microelectronics, our annual report showcased me and my African-American boss about a digital depression technology that we worked on. So we're very thankful for that opportunity to represent the company. And out of the 250,000 employees, AT&T chose me to represent the company in early 2000. And then out of all the companies in America, I was chosen to receive this Woman of Color STEM Career Achievement Award. So really give God all the glory. Again, for us as Christian, we could do good work and give God the glory and bless other people. And this is just an example of how we can apply all the gifts that God has given us. As I was retiring, I received many encouragement from coworkers and senior leaders. I'm going to share a few examples to demonstrate that diversity of our senior leaders, and also to show how even I'm a short little Asian woman, and through my 33 years, how God can use me to influence others and make a contribution in this diverse environment. So this was a Caucasian mentor that I had, and he's very thoughtful. Oftentimes, when I send him email, he will respond longer length than mine. And for example, he has 2 pages of what he wrote in my retirement memory book. He actually just became the CEO of the whole entire company. I actually had a chance to share my testimony with him and share the gospel with him as well. So he knows that I'm a Christian, and he knows how I've made contribution to the company, and that after retirement, it would still be fulfilling and rewarding. And he is so right. And he knows what I would do after retirement would still be significant and meaningful. And he really encouraged his employees like myself on the commitment we have made. So this is just an example of how even a Caucasian, now CEO of the whole company, leading the 250,000 employees, appreciate and encourage an employee like me. And then other senior leaders, this is an example, Hispanic. So he had the job of Enchal is now having. He actually went to the same church as me in Dallas, and how he wanted to pray for my service mission. He knew what I'll be doing after retirement is to help others and to do missions work. And then here's another senior leader who's Asian Indian. So we're going to learn more about their culture. I believe he's also a Christian, and he knows I have a calling that I need to go. And he said, the world needs you. So that to tell you, when we have different coworkers in the company, it's important for people to know you as you are, not just on the surface. So they really know me as a believer, as a committed worker, and as a leader to help the company to be successful. So 2 more final example. Here's an African-American senior leader. He actually just retired after 30 years and became a CEO of another company. He actually spoke at my Call to Work conference in the past. He's a very committed Christian. His wife is a pastor. He actually said on our Call to Work advisory board. So he said that he knows God has a bigger plan for you. And just to tell you how when you build trusted relationship, especially among Christian fellow believers, you can have a much more trusted and reliable sharing, even though as you're leaving the company. And the final one is a Caucasian. He is the boss who hired me to do the job that no one wants to do. And it was the work that is the most successful in my 33 years. And this is one who really couldn't accept the fact that I'm retiring. So he's been in denial, because every morning he would wake up and say, thank God Elaine is leading this project, because he knew I was exactly tailor-made for this very difficult job that no one wants to do. So he was really encouraging, and he's the one who really got the whole retirement party planned and really encouraging, and these beautiful memory books. So all the more they recognize, even though I'm an Asian woman, that they really gave me a chance to do good work. So I want to encourage us, while there may be stereotype, to be sure to insist, not in a negative way, but to stand firm and be assertive, to be who you are, how God has created you, and not to be afraid. So that's the rest of what we're going to focus on today. So this Caucasian VP who planned this whole retirement party even used my name and came up with this acrostic, Elaine Kung. And I mapped them to the 8 Qs that we've been learning. And I show this because if you were to look at these characteristics, and back in the 80s when I started working in my company, wow, electric personality, kinetic force of nature, those could make people think that, wow, Elaine, you're aggressive, you are tough to work with. And that's how some of the people thought about me, because I was very firm on what I believe is right, while being polite and professional. So these characteristics may not be typical of an Asian woman in America. And yet that's how my leaders have recognized me as my personal brand. And they know that I'm uniquely spiritual. They know that I grew through adversity. So these are positive personal brand, and not to be afraid and being misunderstood that you seem to be aggressive. So I have overcome that bias. So at the end, after the retirement party, I wrote this acrostic for all my friends and coworkers and thanked them. And I told them AT&T rocks. So this is my final acrostic for all my friends and coworkers, just to express how touched and how grateful I am working with these amazing team and all the gifts that they have given me. So all the more, I'm not hiding my Christian faith. I am honest and being humble on how well I can carry out my work, and would apologize when I'm wrong, and not to feel like, oh, I'm not good enough of a Christian. So in my own conclusion, how to thrive in the diverse work environment, summarized in this acrostic, thrive. These are the lessons I've learned, and then we'll dive into the different culture, how we can learn from them as well. So try to overcome. Even people may think that you're aggressive, and of course we want to be objective and learn and listen. If I may be aggressive and negative in some areas, so I'll be careful how to improve. And yet I don't want to be discouraged and not to be assertive. So I want to be assertive, stand up and be firm to speak my mind in a professional and a positive way. Humble and be constructive even when we may disagree with others. And that has to do with how we communicate, right? And we've learned some of those techniques. How can you come across, still be constructive, even we may not have the same point of view. And it's okay to have different points of view. And then I learned to renew courage and curiosity. We're going to dive more about curiosity. There's a lot to say about being curious, because you care and you want to learn more about what people think from different culture, different perspective, different points of view, and different personality. And it takes courage. And then integrity is where the CQ comes in, right? Remember the definition of integrity is doing the same right thing, whether people are watching you or not, especially in trying time, under the pressure cooker or some really putting you on the spot. Can you still do the right thing? So that is your integrity, and stand on your ground, even in conflicts. And V is to be a victor, Especially Jesus died for us on the cross. He rose again in 3 days. He's a victor over death, over Satan. There's nothing that can beat us down. So we pray for us to have that courage and faith and confidence in God, that we are victor, and don't feel like, oh, I'm a victim. People didn't listen to me. I have no impact. So pray for God to give us that confidence and not be a victim. And finally, be an example with our attitude. The mindset is so powerful. Our attitude, our heart skill, our ability to do your best, and God will bless us with the rest. And He wants to bless us. And then our words and action. So that's my learning, how to be diverse. So I share this book because it's very helpful while we want to be assertive and we also don't want to be taken advantage of. We need to learn how to set boundary, know when to say yes, when to say no. So many of you have heard of these two Christian authors, Henry Cloud and John Townsend. They have a whole series of books on boundaries for married couples, for teenagers, for children, for people who are dating. And this is for professionals. I encourage you to learn how to set boundary from this book. And of course, the Bible tells us how to set boundary. I always quote this verse to remind us. Matthew 10:16 said, we are like sheep going among wolves. I'm not saying our co-workers are wolves. I'm saying this world's value could be very opposite from the Christian value. So what do? Do we put on our sheep nature, but we put on wolf skin and go with the flow? No, we want to mold Christ's character, right? So we want to be shrewd like the snake, meaning very quick in our thinking, in adapting and listening, quick to listen, and how to be innocent as doves. And I told you the story how when I made a suggestion in a meeting and people ignore me and someone else made the same suggestion and they thought it's a good idea, instead of exploding and getting upset, I say, well, John, thank you for agreeing with my idea. Let's work on it together. So ask God to give us wisdom, how to come across professional, positive, with grace and kindness. So without really being to be stepped on. So if we look at the different cultures and how people move up the ranks, I'm not saying promotion and moving up the rank is the most important. This is just a perspective for us to learn from different culture. And of course, if you look at the top Fortune 500 companies, you see among all the CEOs, there are 441 CEOs that are white over the years. So that's an average. And then South Asian, the Indian friends, there are 10 of those. And then East Asian, there's only 3. And yet our population, the East Asian, meaning Chinese, Korean, Japanese, are 1.5 times more than the South Asian. So you see it's our proportion. And you see on the right, actually list all these wonderful, famous Indian CEO for these top companies. And we're so happy for them and proud of them. So this MIT study states that the American business leaders are more likely to be Indians than Chinese, at least among the Asians. So why is that? What can we learn from the Western culture and from the Eastern culture? And I feel cartoon to give us some quick illustration. When we're angry, the Western culture would show it on their face. They would tell it like it is. They don't sugarcoat. For us, Eastern culture, we would still be smiling, oh, everything is fine, while we're upset inside. So that's not a very good integrity example, right? And of course, when you express your anger, you do it in an intelligent, emotionally intelligent way that we talked about before, not to let others' words and action control how we respond, right? And then what's our view of ourselves? Western culture is very confident. They are tall and proud, and they are standing tall and speak for themselves. Whereas the East culture tend to be more tiny and small. So I'm short, and I'm an Asian woman, and I tend to have a baby face. So all the more disadvantage, and yet don't let those be a barrier and put us down. The final cartoon, what's the view of a boss? Western culture, we learn servant leadership, right? We encourage servant leadership that the boss and the leader will mingle and blend in with the coworkers and go to social hour and get to know them personally and having good connection and really practice servant leadership. The Eastern culture tend to have very egoistic, big boss mindset. I'm taller and more capable than other people. So that's a very different culture. So now when we look at within the Asian culture, between the East Asian, meaning Chinese, Korean, Japanese, versus the South Asian, the Indian culture, and we're very happy we have Indian friends on this class and they can validate for us. So our East Asian culture tend to emphasize a lot about humility, harmony, and stability, so much that we tend to run away from conflicts and avoid them. Now, these three qualities are not bad. They are good to have. However, if we emphasize too much, then we ended up suffer because you're not standing up for what you think. Whereas on the South Asian culture, they tend to encourage discussion, debate, not necessarily argument, right? And it's people to make their points. So that is important in corporate America. You need to be assertive in communicating what you think. So I summarize and compare what to do, the do's on the left, positive, thrive in diversity, to stand firm, and on the right, negative, the stereotype, and that we tend to get disadvantaged that way. So we want to be assertive, not so much just aggressive. We want to be constructive when we disagree and collaborate. And then we're going to talk more about that in conflict resolution. The best outcome of conflict resolution is win-win. And it takes a lot of work, of course. So instead of compromising and withdrawing and running away and avoiding, right? So we want to stand firm and let the blessings flow and help us build friendship, be real peacemaker instead of fleeing and freezing and fight and run away. So that's peace faker. It's not real peace. It's just pretend peace, right? And we want to work hard and also work smart. And don't just work heads down and no one knows who you are. So heads up and get to know other people. And of course, heads up to seek God and look up to God to give us guidance and let people know who you are, what you do, and how you contribute to the team. And we need to learn to speak up and set boundary instead of just being silent or let people taking advantage of and have no boundary. And we want to have unity in diversity, like a salad. In a salad, you can have the different vegetable and different fixtures, and you can see it, and you eat it, and you can see the uniqueness, and together they taste really good. So it's unity in diversity. You don't have to be the same like everybody else, so we don't have to be uniform. And then, like I said, want to be a victor, not just a victim. I know this is all easier said than done. So we're going to learn some techniques how to do that. And then ultimately, we want to be a servant leader. Think from people's perspective, how to serve them, influence them to be the best for the greater good, not just a command and control. And we learned quite a bit in the past comparing these two. So that's my conclusion on thriving in diversity, because diversity is powerful. God created all different races, red, yellow, white, and black, all races for a reason. It's all in God's image. And if you look at this top 10 benefits of diversity in companies, in business, wow, you can innovate better. You can serve your customers better because your customer are made up of all different races, different personality, different gender, and your company has much better image like AT&T, and we can retain talent. We can serve the market and the community much better, and also better professional growth. So I'm proud to say in our company, we really allow different diverse groups to be our best. And in summary, we want to embrace diversity for the good. And this is an acrostic I made to remind us, not just thinking about our own race and our own diversity, also embrace other people's differences, especially those who are less fortunate. There are many other people group who may not even have as good opportunities as we are in our education, in our career. So let's embrace the differences, open-minded, and learn to adapt, and also mentor those who are less fortunate. And I know some of us here get a chance to mentor people who are less fortunate. And I encourage all of you to try to look for those opportunities and be brave to speak up your point of view so that you're not being timid or running away. And also learn to read about other cultures and be curious to ask, oh, what do you do in your holiday celebration? Get to know them and be more proactive to ask questions. And in America, there's probably not as good opportunity for some African American or Hispanic. Go alongside with them. Try to be their ally and speak for them and with them, so that we can build our communication skill, confidence, and we're going to now go into conflict resolution. And all of these are important qualities for us to be good leader. And then encourage others to also support those who are less assertive. So together we can be victors, not victim. So I am grateful that I can help others to see how diversity is actually really beautiful. And like we said, at work, when you have people of different interests, personality, there's bound to be conflict. So I want you to know conflicts are not bad. If you don't resolve the conflict, then when working together, it's not working. So we're going to learn some conflict resolution skill. I've given a few talks, and this is a 2-hour talk series on conflict resolution. It's on our website, so you can go listen in full length. And I'm just going to share some brief highlights today. So our goal of conflict resolution and how to implement what we learn is to use the right communication skill and conflict resolution strategy for the right outcome. And the goal is to build trusted and win-win relationship at work or at home too. So I have a whole long list of journey 1 through 10. I underline a few that I'm going to share with you because of the time limitation. And you can always listen to the full length in YouTube, or we can do some more in-depth discussion in the future. So through 1 through 10, how we can learn from each one of these. So we'll start with how our conflict ultimately, like I said, is unity in diversity. And usually it's 2 parties or multiple parties involved. And the outcome could be either negative or positive. And of course, we want it to be positive. So let's look into what the 3 myths are. And the 3 responses you've heard already. Do you want to flee, freeze, and avoid a conflict? So that's peace figure. Or do you want to fight and then peace breaker? You break the peace. Or the best response is real peacemaker, right? So you let the blessings flow and be a friend with them. And there's more detail that we won't be able to cover today. So let's look at what the 3 myths are. We thought conflicts are bad. We should avoid them. Like I said, not all conflicts are bad. Many conflicts are healthy, are good, because we have different perspective. And we just look at it with a positive outlook and say, okay, let's understand why you think it that way. And conflicts that are healthy help us to know each other better, build better relationship, and come up with better solutions. And then the second myth is conflicts are natural, cannot be prevented, avoided. That's not true, right? Because if you already know certain people's hot button, then you want to be careful not to get on their nerve. So there's some conflict that can be avoided if it's better not to hit them head on. And of course, some of them need to be addressed in a positive and professional way, then you could do that. And for example, these days, as we live home in the pandemic, we may have more friction with our family. How can we learn to prevent and avoid those? By, remember, zip your mouth unless you have something really good to say, right? So discipline your tongue. Watch what you say. Say what's really encouraging. And then the third myth is, oh, zero-sum game. It's either you win or I lose, or I win, you lose. That is not true. You're going to see example later on. We could have 1 + 1 greater than 3. Can you imagine? You can make the pie bigger so we can all benefit from it more, because together we can accomplish more. You have more ideas to come up with solutions that are out of the box. So ultimately, when we resolve the conflict, we want to build these 3R relationship, right? Cannot emphasize anymore. And our whole class is learning how to respond to God as He has called us to work, the way that Jesus would work. So Jesus would build relationship in a positive way. So we want to influence others and build good teamwork. Second is to have good result as a team, right? So this you can see is the leadership definition in here. Ability to influence others to be their best for the greater good, aligned to a shared vision. So we want to have good result together. And the third R, when we take Jesus to work, is to have real Christian faith come alive in the office as we take Jesus to work, as we have an empty seat for Jesus reminding us, and as God shows up and orchestrate. So our Christian faith and our testimony in action. So remember these 3R in conflict resolution at work. So I have a bonus for you that I also have 3R for conflict resolution at home. So this is the reminder on our definition of leadership, right? So hopefully at the end of the sessions, you have it memorized. So here's the bonus. The 3R goals for resolving conflict at home. Not identical, but somewhat similar. Of course, number 1, happy family, happy wife, happy life. We want to have happy family members, relationship. Number 1, always. Number 2, parents need to be role model for our children. When you're resolving the conflict, every conflict could be a crisis. And yet we believe there's an opportunity from underneath the crisis and conflict. If you look at it as a 3R. So when you come across a conflict at home, use it as an opportunity to build relationship and to show your children what is the right word and the right attitude and the right action. Be the role model. And number 3, our goal as parents for the 18 years that we raise our children before they go away for college is to help them to be responsible, to grow up as mature and independent, godly young men and women. So I do a lot of parenting talk as well. And this is a new one I just included when answering a question of how to resolve conflict. So this is a bonus for you. So we are a mirror image of our children. However you behave, they model after you, whether you like it or not. So those are the 3R for resolving conflict at home. So continue on the journey of 1 through 10. I'll take a few to share with you on conflict resolution skill. Sad to say, these are the 5 universal fears. The reason that we cannot handle conflict well often could be because of these 5 universal fears, right? Especially in a diverse workplace. We're afraid being criticized, being rejected. We're afraid of failure. We're afraid of losing what we have because we have a sense of security when we have what we have and we don't want to lose it. And we are afraid that we didn't get what we want. And remember, if you go back to the Bible, I mentioned it in our adversity quotient section, that God gave us so many promises in the Bible. Do not be afraid. Have no fear. How many times? 365 times. So you've got at least one verse for one day for the whole year. So praise the Lord. So pray for us to overcome these fears. And when we overcome these fears, it's easier to handle conflicts. So it's important to recognize our blind spot, our roadblocks. So that hopefully should help us to address the conflict. Here's more. 7 deadly sins of not listening. When we're in the middle of conflict, the worst enemy is not listening, right? Remember when we talk about communication and EQ, God gave us 2 ears for a reason and 1 mouth. So we need to listen twice as much as we talk. Listening, in fact, is the acrostic for my leadership quotient. Remember, LISTEN is the listen for the leadership quotient. So these are 7 deadly sins when we didn't listen. So if you find yourself doing this is something I'm guilty of too. I need to learn. Sometimes when we don't listen, you own your own opinion and discount other people's thinking. You tend to be biased and have a filter, like a colored glass. You try to think and talk ahead of other people and forecast. So you didn't really listen and pay attention. You're already planning what to say next. You may compare. And we know comparison is the worst thing. So try not to compare so you can try to relate better. And then you couldn't wait to talk and you keep rehearsing in your mind while you're listening. So you're not paying attention to listen. And sometimes you're not sincere when you tend to just say, oh yeah, you're good. Oh yeah, just kind of pacifying and move on. And finally, sometimes we assume and second guess, oh, I think they really are too selfish, or I think they didn't really like me. So those are wrong assumptions. So these are deadly sin. So let's try to overcome that. So now let's get more positive. So what are some counter approaches to counter against all those sins and fears? These are very powerful. Be curious and not be critical. If you really ask God to give us a curious mind, just like how Sunny shared, that she's genuinely interested in others, curious and ask questions. How you doing? Oh, I like to learn more what you're really good at. Learn about your culture instead of being critical. Be caring instead of crushing, right? As we all know, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So start with your heart, not just your head, your heart, right? And connect before correct. Many people told me they really like this one. Before you correct your children, your spouse, before you correct your subordinates and other people at work, connect in the heart first. When you have good relationship and good emotional connection, it's much easier to handle the head knowledge and what's right or what's wrong. Recently, we just had an election in America. Many parents asked, how do we talk to our young generation? We have different perspective, right? So we learn to do these 3 C. Ask them, curious, why they think this way. Get to know them, care about them. It's not about correcting that you voted for the wrong party, because you could be wrong too, right? So we need to connect and ask instead of assuming, and then say, oh, tell me more. Oh, what happened next? Because people like to talk, and you would really honor them when you ask them and listen to what they're saying. Recently, I went to a class that taught a lot about curiosity. So I learned from that and summarized a new acrostic, how to build the CQ, curiosity quotient. And I encourage you and your whole family to learn how to be more curious. So this is brilliant. So I learned from this whole workshop, brilliant is the whole acrostic, because being curious, you are able to build emotional quotient, build deeper and trusted relationship. I wouldn't have to say anymore. So encourage you to learn how to be curious. That way you have more respect for other people's perspectives. This way you can resolve conflict easier. And you can be more in control of your response to new information instead of being reactive to it, because you now know and you ask the right question. And you're less defensive reaction to your stress, because you're more proactive to ask, to learn, and you're less aggressive wanting to be right and smart. So these are practical ways for us to be more curious, that you don't think that you're always right. You can ask and don't pretend to be know-it-all. And then you acquire new knowledge in the long haul, and you ask good questions. And asking question is a whole art. There's a whole topic on its own, something we should learn about more in the future too, right? Remember, we want to ask open-ended question, not closed-ended, like yes, no. You ask why, where, when, how, and people can tell you more when you ask those open-ended questions, and you learn more. And then you navigate very complex situations by being curious. And finally, you can have more tolerance for ambiguity and learn different ways and how people think. So that's a good list of action you can do to build up your curiosity quotient. Continue on conflict resolution. So these are practical 5 steps. There are many ways to skin a cat, many ways to resolve conflict. So these are an example of 5 steps, how you can pause. And it's an acrostic to remind us the 2 ears, right? James 1:19 said, quick to listen, slow to ask, to speak, and slow to get angry. And yet I also want to add, you can quick to ask questions. Questions are good to ask. So first, you want to prepare and pray before you go to resolve this conflict so that you're calm, you're collected, you're prepared in your mind. What are your talking points and your approach and your strategy? We'll cover a little bit more later on. And be ready to go address this conflict at the right time, in the right mood, in the right setting. A is affirm. Be sure you have that foundation of good relationship and knowing to use the right positive words. Remember, we talked about EQ and all the right ways to be affirmative, how to praise them with character and catch them do right. U is to understand their interest. So this is where your curiosity comes in, right? Understand from their perspective, why they think differently from you, right? What is their interest? What is their goal? What is their benefit? How can I help them achieve their benefit while I can still address the collective greater good and a shared vision? And then search for creative solution together. It may not be their way. It may not be your way. It could be your combined solution that can be win-win. That's the ultimate. And then eventually evaluate all the different options and then together decide, you know, what's the best way? When you're searching for solution, it could be your idea and you have a way to communicate so that they also see that, oh, it's a good idea. And then they may even suggest, how about that? And in fact, that is your idea. Then you could say, wow, they have a good sense of ownership and say, whoa, what a good idea. Let's do this together. So if you can some way communicate and guide a discussion and translate your idea into an idea that they can buy into and they feel that is their idea too. And that's very powerful. So very typically, this is a famous model, Thomas Kuhlman, on defining conflict resolution strategy. And this is the very typical 5 strategy. And all 5 can work depending on the situation. So on the vertical axis is how assertive you are. Remember we talked about being assertive? So if you are not assertive in the bottom, or you're more assertive to address your own needs. And then on the horizontal axis, on the far left is when you're not cooperative, and the far right is when you're very cooperative and good to work with. So I have an orange. We're going to use the orange as an example to apply the conflict resolution strategy. There's only one orange, and Joyce and I need to figure out how to share this orange. So if the first strategy, if you're not cooperative, you're not assertive, you just don't want to deal with it, then the orange is going to sit there. Joyce and I are both going to avoid the problem and not going to talk about it, and no one got the orange. So it's lose, no good. Then if I'm cooperative and just go along with the flow. And I'm not assertive, so I'm going to just let Joyce have the whole orange. And I am losing and she's winning. So that's accommodating. In some cases, these could be okay strategies, such as if your boss, of course, right? He or she may be right, and you don't want to confront if it's not that important and you think he's the expert or she's right, then you may either avoid or accommodate. So depending on the situation. In the case of this orange, then ended up Joyce got the whole orange and I have nothing. Not a good idea. So medium cooperation and medium assertiveness is when we compromise, right? Middle of the road. Okay, we'll just split the orange into half. You get half, I get half. So it's kind of partial win-win, lose-lose, right? So that's compromise. And we probably see this quite a bit in many cases. And sometimes it may work, right? In some cases that we probably have to just share. And then if you're very assertive and are not cooperative, then you ended up head-on competing. You have to win, and then you get, that's going to really hurt the relationship, right? And finally, this is the best, if you are able to collaborate. And this is when the orange idea going to come out and say, okay, Joyce, what do you need? Oh, you need the orange juice. Oh, I need the orange peel to do some cooking. Got it. So now you can have all the juice and I can have all my orange peel to do the cooking. And that's when we have win-win, right? Instead of splitting into half. So this is a simple example. And ultimately, collaboration is the goal. In important projects, important cases, how can we understand what is their need? What is their requirement? How can we help each other? And so that will be the goal. So another example of how we can take 5 simple praise steps. When you get to understand each other, right, as we talk about a problem that we need to solve, okay, what is the positive thing that we both agree on? Got it. So this project, these portions we agree on. So let's start with positive. Always good to start with positive. And then R is reverse. Okay, what are the pieces that we did not agree on? So let's list those out, right? And then for those that we don't agree with, and go through the different strategy we just talked about, understand where they're coming from, and work toward the A, to aggregate and some way to find a win-win solution and listen to each other. And Y is to yield to the different option, right? We want to evaluate and see what's a good way, pros and cons, and together, 1 + 1 is greater than 3, and finally get to the solution, right? And it's a good way as a praise, right? And that could really be beneficial. So here's some practical ways to talk about conflict. You need to learn how to start. Like I said, need to pick the right time, the right place, and the right mood. If it's not ready yet, you have to wait until they're ready. You need to pause, remember the PAUSE, and find a way to discuss so that it's encouraging honor, not accusation. So you could say, Amy, I'd like to talk about the way you treated me earlier. Is now a good time, or should we talk after the team meeting? So this is a sensitive situation. You ask for permission, when's a good time? Second, learn when to stop, right? If at some point it's not a good way to keep going, you need to relax or take a mental break from it, either physically leaving the room or mentally leaving the situation. Think, oh, we better stop now. And it's getting pretty tense. We can continue this conversation later. Let's take a break. So it's always good to know when to pause, and then we can come back and think about it later. And the third one is to learn how to listen. We talked so much about the 2 ears. So when you listen between the lines, then you'll be able to come up with better solution. And finally, remember, ask good questions. So these are the 2 ways of asking questions. Which one do you think is better? Do you feel as though we resolved the issue we discussed this morning, or did you have some further thoughts? Versus, how do you feel about the issue we discussed this morning? Or what other thoughts would you like to share? So the second one is more open-ended, right? Instead of framing and expecting they would agree with you. Finally, this is the last one. How can we be alert? So these are the final 5 groups of suggestions, very practical on what we discussed in resolving conflicts and being more assertive. A is to ask instead of assuming. Avoid the blame game. Remember, if you blame on one person, you sing a finger, you have 4 fingers pointing to yourself, right? Avoid getting defensive. Avoid using you, right? Think about the I statement, how you feel, express how you feel, why you think this way, instead of just right and wrong. Try to listen and learn to apologize. And I promise next time we're going to talk about the 7 ways of apology, how to build a relationship and restore the relationship, and learn how to forgive also. L is to listen actively. We already talked about how important active listening is. And remember, the word listen, spell L-I-S-T-E-N, is the same character for silent. So listen means silence when you rearrange the letters, right? And see from their point of view, prioritize the conflict over being right. You don't have to always be right. It's more figuring out, listening, and building the relationship and coming up with a solution together. E is to express your point of view. Don't just shy away from it, and use I statement and tell them how you feel, how you may not be understood correctly. And then R is to respect, right? The relationship takes a lot of respect to build. And finally, T is to tame your emotion. We got to be calm, right? Always have that mental pause to make sure that you are calm. And it takes time. Sometimes it's not going to be overnight. It may take weeks. It may take months. Some conflict may take years. So be sure to focus on the current, not just the past. So that's a lot we covered today on conflict resolution and diversity. So just to remind us, right? Again, all the knowledge, the 4H, just not the head, but make sure it gets to our heart, our hands, and our habits. So our small group discussion is going to allow you to do that, to move from passive learning, just a 5% lecture, to active learning, all the way, sharing, telling other people to 90%. So our small group is going to be able to help us do that. And I encourage you to keep finding and working with your partner to share what you learn, so that it's not just vicious cycle, but should be a virtuous cycle to learn and apply and encourage one another. And this is our website, calltowork.org. So there's also Line and WeChat group that you're welcome to join. We have this conference. We had one last week, and tomorrow is the final one. And if you didn't register, it's ended. You can take a picture and join us tomorrow in the 10 a.m. to 12:30 Pacific, 2.5 hours. And it's going to be on work as global mission. So you're welcome to join us. And finally, our recordings, our training out there, also under Encourage, Elinkum Resources, and very thankful for Sadia putting all our YouTube videos on this page. And also, Michelle sends you an invitation for free access to Right Now Media at work. So some of you have accepted. If you have not, look at your email in the spam box maybe, and be sure to accept it, and we'll provide you some instruction how to take advantage of the material. So we have 2 more classes, same time next week, and then we'll skip the week after. So remember, it's 1 hour earlier than usual in America. So next week, we're going to learn about Messenger of the Gospel. It's the final of the 6P and the final Q, humility quotient. And then we'll take a break for Thanksgiving in America. And then we'll come back in the first week of December for our last class to manage time and manage our life. Okay, Joyce, I'm going to give you the time, and then we'll get ready for the small group. It's stuck, huh?
Thank you, Elaine. It seems that the last few slides actually didn't show up.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Is there anything that you'd like to just flash out?
Yeah, we'll do very quickly. So we're up to, I think it was here, right? Up to here. Sorry about that. Okay. So, okay, you got that already. So we know this very well. You probably can draw it on your own, the 4H, and then the passive to active learning. and then find a partner from vicious cycle to virtuous cycle. And this is our website. And for those who have Line or WeChat, you can take a picture and get access to resources. So this is the one you may take a picture if you didn't register. This is our webinar ID for Zoom that you can join tomorrow. And then we have the call to work breakout too. And then these are the recordings. Okay? And then the final, oh yeah, this is the Right Now Media. So if you didn't get the email, go check your spam box and accept, then you can access Right Now Media at Work video training material for free because we already pay for it. And then just to remind us our time, it looks like most of you know already. So next week should be okay. And then, yeah, next week is the last app.
欢迎订阅生命树媒体频道。